And now to the business at hand. About this dude, Paul Richardson. My goodness. Well, here's the deal. He's got one great wife. Marianne, will you please wave to everybody for just a sec? Is she a cutie or what? But I tell you this, I gotta tell you what he did to her one day. In 1966, Paul was red hot in that infamous Napa Supermodified. And it was owned by Bobby Whitcomb and wrenched by some great guys like Paul's brother-in-law, Butch, Tommy Howell, David Johnson. They won everywhere they went. And then one August evening, Paul was warming up at Star Speedway, and Marianne was sitting in those grandstands between the third and the fourth turn. Well, Paul came down the straightaway, as usual, doing about 300 miles an hour, and he ducked into the third turn, and everything was fine, and that was until the throttle hung up. So he roared up the banking, over that lip, and took off into the air. He noticed right at that point that the wall beneath where Marianne was sitting was coming up awful fast. He thought to himself, my goodness, this is going to be a big one. And he recalls that it was one of those strange moments when everything in your life seems to flash in front of you. Well, what a life it had been. Back in 1965, Paul Richardson was just kind of a hot rod kid up in the in the Merrimack Valley, and he found an old B car to run at Oscar Ridland's Pine Speedway. Now, Oscar must have really liked this new nutcase driver that he had, because very soon Paul was able to park the car on its nose against a phone pole coming off turn 4. But you know, there was something in there that seemed to stick. And that next year, Paul went for it. He went out and bought Al Riley's Little Princess, which was a red-hot Class A cut-down. And quite remarkably, that next year, he won the championship at Hudson, while Ronnie Bouchard won it down at the Pines. Well, any of you who know Paul know that he has sort of a humorous way, an easygoing way about him out of the race car. But his very much up on the wheel driving began to get the notice of all the really good super teams around the valley. He drove for Butch True and Deuce DeSalt. He drove the Timmons family, number 427, and Eddie Perkins' Crown 7 Roadster. Then, in the 70s, Ricochet, as he began to be known, was driving all over the place on that rather raucous Nesmar tour. He was in Canada, in New York, in New England, and in Florida. He had some particularly heart-pounding moments at Thompson Speedway, one in quite the duel with Big Daddy Don McLaren, and another one which was really quite an inspired end-over-end flip right out of the ballpark in Chet Richardson's car, which he parked rather neatly in the parking lot between a couple of rows of cars. Again, in the 80s, it was back to great versatility. He drove the Norseman late model. He drove for Dave Story on the Act Tour, and he was in the nasty Neil Murray naughty number 7s. Were also dramatic back-to-back wins at Star Classic and Jack Murphy's Snafu Special. And one of the most interesting things about that car is that Paul was testing it one day at Thompson, and Richie Evans, his buddy, was watching him. Richie just shook his head and came over to Paul afterwards and said, nobody has ever in history gone around Thompson Speedway that fast. In the early 90s, it was super time again in Ron Marino's beautiful Pennzoil car, but also some greased lightning pro stocks for Jason Jandrin. And that gets us back to the Napa Super and to Marianne. There she was, sitting in horror that night in August of 1996, as this blue and yellow rocket ship came arcing through the air right towards her. It was really quite a moment when he hit the wall, just a resounding explosion. Paul was savagely hurt, and that's when Mary Ann took over. When Paul arrived at the Exeter Hospital with a broken back, major internal injuries, a shattered leg, and a shattered foot, Mary Ann was told that her husband would never walk again. Well, she wasn't having any of that. And in about 10 minutes, Paul was in a helicopter headed for Beth Israel Hospital in Boston. The next day, after hours and hours and hours of double surgery, the surgeons came out and said, yeah, we think Paul's going to be able to be somewhat mobile again in the future, but it's going to require a huge amount of therapy. Well, they weren't just kidding. I don't know if there's anything more amazing than having watched someone maintain such good humor and such a positive attitude through a winter of discontent and therapy and pain like Paul did that winter. Probably the only more amazing thing in the whole world is guess who won the opener at Star Speedway the next year in the very same car. Paul eventually finished out his career running in the Bushies division with a car owned by its family. And it was really pretty remarkable that they were able to have podium finishes in that car, even at the time that it was becoming impossible to do it with all those yuppie upstarts from Mooresville. But they did. So now, looking back at it, given all the years that he's raced, all the experiences he's had, all the miles traveled, the races won or lost, you've got to think how hard it is for somebody like Paul to pull the plug. Well, he just sort of sits back, talks about it over a beer, and says, ain't it just something that a guy like me at 62 can still be dreaming about getting into a race car? Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you for permanent induction in the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame, one true old-time race car driver and one real present-time character, Paul Ricochet Richardson.
We forgot to mention that he did a lot of marketing for me too, and he's the reason why I got the Napa sponsorship. Napa, New England. Thank you, Lou. Well, in 1955, my dad said to my older brother, you want to go to the races tonight? They got midgets up there at that Pine Speedway in Groveland. I think I was, 3 or 4, and I said, gee, could I go? And they kind of ignored me. And next thing I know, my mother says, why don't you take him? He won't be a problem. So they took me, and I pulled into Pine Speedway, and man, I couldn't believe this place. This noise, stuff running around, dirt, dust. So I went in, sat down, I'm looking around, I'm thinking, where are these little people? Said we're going to see the midgets, right? And then, boy, I'll tell you what, I don't know if it was the benzene or the alcohol, or whatever they were burning, but boy, I really did like this stuff. And so I used to get to go once in a while, not much. Then in 65, 64, I went again, and I had a little 52 Ford Coupe, and they said, hey, we're gonna have a spectator race tonight. I said, so what's this all about? So I went down to Kenny Small and signed up. I went out. Man, I'm telling you what, I really got hooked on this stuff. I finished second. I says, this is definitely a lot of fun. So I started going to the races quite a bit, and then in 65, like Lou said, I started racing, and man, I really liked it. And I met this guy, Jim Timmons, down the street, and I said, Jim, I got a problem. I wrecked my car, and I can't weld or nothing. So he put a roll cage in the car, cut the roof off, and put a roll cage in it. A pretty neat job. I said, this guy's pretty creative, you know. Then it went on and on and on. Bob Bouchard, well, anyway, look at it. I got 4 tables here tonight. I drove for 16 people. Tell me, racing ain't expensive. They all lasted a couple of years. Hey, look, I just can't do it no more. So I move on to someone else. Hey, I'll give a guy a shot. First time I drove for Ron Marino, he heard about me. He says, what's this hot shot down the street? My car can't get around the first turn, so I give him a shot. Call me up. I said, yeah, I'll see you Wednesday afternoon in Star. I went up. I don't know, what did it take, 3 laps to run, hit the wall, knock all the wheels off the car. He says, at least you did something. I've never seen a car do that before. So it went on and on and on. Big Daddy Don McLaren, he and I went at it one night at Thompson. I still say I beat you, but they said it was a dead heat. We both got a Oswego qualifier. I qualified 8th. He hit the fence. He needed the qualifying spot. I didn't mean that, but anyway, I've had a ball, trust me. Yeah, geez, I was chasing Westy. He ain't here tonight. Must have had a broken wheel on his walk-up. But anyway, I was chasing him one night up there, and he says, I know what I'm going to do. I'll get rid of this Richardson guy. I was banging on him a little bit. He hit a bale of hay with his left front, and it ended up on me. So I reached up in the roll bar and ripped it off, and I got it in my hand, and when I went by him, I threw the hay over to him. But you know, all kidding aside, 36 years of racing, I'll tell you what, you know, they tell you to keep it in 3 minutes. I can't. You ain't going to do it. There was something else I wanted to share with you people. Oh yeah, the Catamount race there for Tom Curley up the Catamount. I never saw the track before in my life. I went in there and I won it. Tom says, no one's ever done that one. I said, well, I like the place. But I drove for Dave Story. Dave gave me one heck of a race car that year. We won quite a few races. Had a lot of fun. I know I'm forgetting to say thank you to somebody. Oh, my wife. Are you kidding me? And she kept all the kids together. All my kids are here. And we made racing a family thing, and she'd cook out and stuff. I guess she didn't like the track food or something. But, you know, we had a ball. But I just want to thank everybody and all the promoters, and had a lot of fun. Thanks again.